right, we're getting set up for our big constitutional party this afternoon as I teach everyone about grand juries. Apparently, I got something in the car. It is what it is. Gentlemen, I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and your team to the room once we get started. So the two of you will want to come on camera when I call for you, unmute, and then one at a time, introduce yourself. Make sure you speak slow enough that you highlight because we want them to be able to see your face. And then you can turn your cameras back off. Lori, I'm going to admit everyone once they're in, do the mute all and keep muted, please.
Okay, Judge.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. We are ready to get the ball rolling. We've got quite a bit to do. Let's go ahead and go back on the record. We are on the record in the 394th Judicial District Court. I have in my presence all 12 grand jurors from all 5 counties and all 4 alternates for all 5 counties. We have quite a bit to go through, and our first order of business is going to be to to select our presiding grand jurors for each county. So I'm just going to call out the names for each county. And if your name is called out, congratulations. I'll talk to you about what it means in just a few moments. So first, Brewster County. Our presiding grand juror is Joan Bullner. Our alternate presiding grand juror is Robert Dawson. For Culberson County, our presiding grand juror is Marcus Ortega, and our alternate is Desiree Clark. In Presidio County, our presiding grand juror is Vicki Wright, and our alternate is Chris Dowling. In Jeff Davis County, our presiding is Marilyn McGee, and our alternate is Howard Chamberlain. And in Hudspeth, our presiding is Jessica Carr, and our alternate is Clifton Walker. So those of you I just named, you're going to have to buy this computer and this expensive software. I'm going to send you to school. I'm just kidding. You don't do any of that. None of that is true. So I don't want you to worry. In the course of our presentation over the next hour, I'm going to explain everything that it means. So I don't want anyone being worried at all. It's going to be very simple. So let's get started. Let me get to the right page here. All right. I want to remind each of you grand jurors that you have previously been sworn. So your service has already begun. You are, as you sit here right now, grand jurors for your county. Now you are probably sitting there thinking, what have I got myself into and who did I step on that this bad luck has happened? I don't want you to be worried at all. This hour is going to be a crash course on grand jury. And when we're done, I promise you, you're going to be right at home and comfortable. Anyone who's chatting that they're having trouble hearing, Ms. Olguin will be helping you in the chat box behind the scenes. So everyone take a deep breath. I want you to relax. This is going to be fine. Just listen. Don't take notes. It's all going to make perfect sense when we're done. So by a show of hands, how many of you have served on a state grand jury before? Any hands? Boy, very few hands. Good. That's how I like it. I like to have fresh, new faces. For those of you, the 95% of you who didn't raise your hands, if you believe you know what happens in the grand jury because you watch the news or television or movies, or God forbid, because you read social media, not only do you not know what happens in the grand jury, but what you think you know is wrong. Those sources are not trying to educate you. They are trying to keep you watching so they can sell advertising and make money. What you never hear on those sources is something like, today across the nation, tens of thousands of grand jurors did everything exactly right. Because that wouldn't keep you watching and it wouldn't get you to increase viewership. But the fact is, that's the reality of it. What the news will do is find some random case, and for some reason, all of the channels grab a hold of it. And for 18 hours a day, they do split screen talking heads saying terrible things like the grand jurors are crooked or bought off or racist or whatever it is. Well, let me tell you, I have now overseen 80 grand juries and 1,280 grand jurors, not including today. And that is not reality. And I know that those of you in here who have been on one before could nod your heads along with me. Grand jurors care about what they're doing, and they work hard, and they do the right thing. And until you've been in that room and you've served as a grand juror, you just don't know the reality of how much protection you have through the grand jury process as an American citizen under the Constitution. It's an incredible amount of protection from the government for the individual by each other. And let me tell you how important that is. There are places in the world where if you're accused of stealing, the shop owner can take you outside with a machete and whack your hand off. I mean, no trial, no arrest, no lawyer, no hand. It's over right then. There are places in the world today where if you're accused of a violent crime, you can be dragged out of your home, buried in the street up to your neck, and have your head stoned by your friends and neighbors until you're dead. There are places in the world today where if you speak poorly about a political leader, they can imprison you for life, put you in front of a firing squad, or maybe you just disappear. There are countries where people have been imprisoned for a tweet. Prison over a tweet. And the worst one, you may have heard about this in the news in 2018, but there was a man who was accused of a sex crime, and his town leaders, not a judge, not a jury, no trial, they commanded that his family would endure a revenge rape. Now that is exactly as bad as it sounds. The male members of the victim's family rape female member of the accused's family to balance the scales of justice. That is their idea of a justice system in certain parts of the world. Our idea is just a little different. In our justice system, no one can be punished by the government unless 24 people who live in that person's same community say they can. Now, that is not a mistake on my part. It's 24. And you're thinking, well, I know 12. 12 is the trial and beyond a reasonable doubt and presumption of innocence. The other 12 are you. The grand jury is the other 12. Because in our system, you can't even be prosecuted in Texas unless these 12 people, you say it's okay. If you say no, our prosecutors can't do anything. That's amazing. So you decide who gets prosecuted, right? Well, who decides guilt or innocence? The people do, not the government. Who decides whether someone should be punished? It's the people again. And who decides what the punishment is? Surely the government, surely the judge gets to decide what the punishment is. No, it is you, the people. So we have an amazing system with incredible protections that a lot of the world wouldn't believe if they knew. And you're now a part of that. And so let's talk a little bit about how that works. Now, the presiding grand juror, it's what in the old days they would call a jury foreman. So now you've got a little bit different jobs with the grand jury. And let me tell you, the 5 of you, 10 of you, what that is. First and foremost, someone needs to sign the documents showing what the decisions of the grand jury were. We don't need all 12 of you to sign everything. So the presiding grand juror is the one who signs, right? There'll be a line on the bottom and they'll sign when y'all vote and decide. That's the primary job. If you have to have someone in charge of your deliberations, just like in a regular jury trial, that person does that too. That's usually not a big job because y'all will work well together. And then the third thing, really the only other thing, is that the only person who can communicate with me as the court is the presiding grand juror. And we're going to talk about that at the end. It's very rare, but it can happen. And I'll talk to you about how that works. So you may think all the way back to this morning and remember that I told you that the grand jury's job is to look into conduct that occurred in your county and decide whether someone should be charged with a crime as a result. Pretty simple. You look at what happened, and you decide if anyone should be charged with a crime. So let's talk about what that's not. You will never be concerned with whether someone is guilty. That is not your job. to be proven guilty of anything, the state must prove that they did exactly what the state says they did, and they have to prove every single step beyond a reasonable doubt. Everybody knows that standard, beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest standard we've got. It means any doubt you have left over is unreasonable. Aliens flew in and stole it. The ghost of Victor Chavez came in and did it. So they teleported in and out of the house without opening the door, right? Harry Potter stuff. The burden for you is very, very different. It is much lower. And it is a burden that you all know because you are confronted with it every time you walk outside. That burden is probable cause. The reason I say you know what it is probable cause is the burden a police officer must have to arrest you, right? There's no trial before you get arrested, right? It can happen on the spot. They see it, they talk to a few witnesses, they decide what they think happened, and they can make an arrest. It's the same burden that you're going to have when deciding whether someone should face charges, because as a result of that decision, they're going to be arrested. It's the same kind of thing. So let's talk about what probable cause actually is. Probable cause is this: considering all of the facts and circumstances as you understand them to be, you have a reasonable belief that a crime has been committed or a law has been broken. Simple, right? I'm going to say it again. Considering all of the facts and circumstances as you understand them to be, you have a reasonable belief that a crime has been committed or a law has been broken. Very squishy, right? It's only the facts and circumstances that you understand. It's a belief that just has to be reasonable. Okay, it's very low burden. It's way lower than reasonable doubt. That's because there's not going to be a trial. And that brings me to the next thing. There will not be a defendant in the room. He will not have a lawyer with him or her facing his or her accusers. I'm not going to be there. There will be no judge. You won't be in the courtroom most of the time. You might even have some coffee or a snack and wear comfortable clothes. And you might be sitting in your own home, just like you are right now. It's very relaxed. Now, one of those reasons is we want you to enjoy your service, and you will. And so the district attorneys work very hard to make sure that each of you is able to enjoy your service. It is not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday in a courtroom jury box. So you're wondering, then how does it work? Well, I'm glad you asked. I'm going to tell you. First, let's talk about how cases get presented. Okay. As your judge, my job essentially ends today. I am not involved in cases getting presented to you. Law enforcement does an investigation. They take it to the district attorney's office. The DA decides if something is worthy of being presented for you to consider. And then they're going to bring you together. Now, I don't know what one of our new DAs is going to do, but in the past, some of the DAs just use email. They send an email, they give a day, they say we'd like to do it at some time in the afternoon, and they work with all 12 of you to find a time that works for everyone. And then maybe it'll be by Zoom, and maybe it'll be in person or back and forth, I don't know. But you're going to work with the DA, and they're going to set up times every month or two to get together and present cases. And they present the case. Now, what does that mean? Since it's not a trial, what is a presentation? Here's what the DA's job is. Their job is to give you the information they think you need to get an accurate understanding of what happened. Okay? They're not going to give you all their evidence. They're not going to try the case to you. They're not going to tell you what the defendant would say if he or she were there defending themselves. That all happens later with a different burden and a different group of 12 people. Their job is to give you what they think you need to understand enough to determine whether probable cause exists, right? You might get a police report. Maybe they'll bring you a witness like the arresting officer or an eyewitness to an event. Maybe they have a body cam, like with DWI. Sometimes we get a body cam of someone's weaving or trying to touch their nose. I don't know. That's up to them. But they'll walk in and say, today we're going to present Mr. Smith on a charge of DWI. And they're going to give you the evidence they think you need in a very informal setting to get an understanding of what happened. And then they'll ask you to deliberate and vote. So what happens next is, after you have all the evidence that they want to give you, everyone leaves the room but the 12 grand jurors. Okay. No one else can be with you. So not a bailiff, not a judge, not a witness, not a prosecutor. It is just you alone. If you're on Zoom, it means the 12 of you will be in a breakout room, and it'll be just the 12 of you and no one else there. That's absolutely crucial, because you cannot deliberate or vote unless it's just y'all. Okay, everybody? Nods? Just making sure everybody's still listening. All right. So you kick them out and it's time to deliberate. When everyone's gone and the door is closed, now you can talk. Talk about your thoughts, share them with each other, listen to each other, and then after your discussion, it's time to vote. So, based on what you've heard, what you understand, do you have a reasonable belief that a crime was committed or not? If 9 of you say yes, then that person will face charges. If less than 9, 8 or 0, anywhere in there, then they will not face charges. That's because 9 is a quorum. You cannot do any business unless 9 of you show up, because it takes 9 votes to do anything, right? So you must show up when you're summoned, because if 8 people show up, those 8 people won't take long to figure out who the 4 are that didn't come, and they're going to be mad because you've wasted their time, particularly someone like Del City or Terlingua, who drives 2 hours in, and they show up and only 8 people are there, and they drive 2 hours home. How are they going to feel about their day being wasted? So don't do that. Show up when you're summoned. So 9 votes. 9 votes say yes. We will call that a true bill. So if 9, 10, 11, or 12 people say yes, then the presiding grand juror, or if they're not there, the alternate presiding, will sign a true bill. And that person gets charged with a crime, and they come to me and I take over. If it's less than 9, the presiding grand juror signs a no bill. No charges for that 6-month period. And they're not even going to know they were presented, probably. It just goes away. Now, there is a third option. And remember this morning when I talked to you about the oath that I told you, well, let me tell you this. That oath is really long. In fact, it's longer than the oath I took to be district judge. It's longer than the oath that Joe Biden took today to be president. It is a long oath with a lot of words. And that's because this position is so powerful and it's just thrust upon you. So they really want you to know and respect the power that goes along with this job. And the third option of what you can do is a really good example of how that works. And here's what it is. Let's say they bring you a case, and at the end of the evidence, y'all deliberate, and you just kind of agree, we don't have enough people who can vote because we're just not sure. I mean, we need to hear more, right? Well, you can make the DA bring you more information. You can even be specific. You can open the door and say, hey, this was a fight at the Crystal Bar in Alpine. And I know from social media that John was bartending that night and he saw the fight because he tweeted about it or he put it on Facebook. We want to hear from John. Bring us John. So you can actually get more information before you vote. And the DA will do it. They'll go and get John and bring it to you. But here's where you get a real understanding of just how powerful this position is. If John refuses to come, he says, hey, I don't want to be put in the middle of this. I'll lose my job and they're all my friends. You can subpoena that person. You can issue a summons and force them to come testify under oath. The sheriff will go pick them up and bring them to you, and we put them on, you will put them under oath, and they'll be forced to testify. And if they still won't, they go to jail, folks. They sit in jail until they either change their minds or you're no longer grand jurors in July. And then a new grand jury comes in and they decide whether that person has to testify. They start the whole process over. You have the authority to have someone picked up, put in jail, and keep them there until the second week of July if they won't tell you what they know. I hope you're thinking to yourself, wow. I mean, that's really something. That's a lot of power. So it doesn't happen often. It's very rare. It happened in Barry Bond's case when his steroid dealer wouldn't testify, allegedly wouldn't testify. So I don't expect that to happen, but I want you to get an understanding of just how powerful the job is. Now, I want to take just a moment and I want to allow our district attorneys, our two DA representatives here to introduce themselves and their team. So first, Ms. Holguin, if you would be so kind as to authorize Mr. Gabaldon to unmute, and then he can speak and he'll pop into everyone's frame.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Lori. And good afternoon, all of y'all. My name is Patrick Gabaldon. I represent the District Attorney's Office for El Paso, Hudspeth, and Culberson County. I recognize several of y'all's faces from either being in a jury pool or a grand jury pool. And I look forward to working with y'all and communicating and getting cases presented to you for the next, well, for as ever long as your term goes. So, Judge, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gabaldon. And he is for Hudspeth and Culberson counties. And then we have a new district attorney for the Tri-County area, which is Brewster, Presidio, and Jeff Davis County. And that is Ori White, who I believe is also here with us. So Ms. Holguin, would you unmute Mr. White?
I have lost Mr. White. Judge, give me 1 second. I've been searching for him.
If he has stepped out, you can unmute one of his assistant DAs. I believe we have 1 or 2 of them here in the room.
Well,
when there are 100 people in the list, it takes a while to find somebody.
I see Mr. Phillips. I'm going to ask him to unmute, and I'll keep looking for Mr. White.
That'll work.
Good afternoon, Judge. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. My name is Jerry Phillips. I'm the first assistant DA in Brewster County, Presidio County, Jeff Davis County. I really do look forward to working with each of y'all. I think you'll find it very interesting, and I think as the judge has already told you, you will learn a great deal about our justice system.
Thank you very much, counsel.
Judge,
All
I
right.
found Mr. White and have asked him to unmute as well.
All right, let's see if he's here.
I'm here.
Go ahead, Mr. White.
Judge, I've appreciated your explanation of the grand jury process, and I'm pleased to be of service in the Tri-County area, which truly is the most scenic district in the state, no doubt. And we've assembled a really good team. We're going to be officing in the office there in Alpine in the courthouse on the first floor. And so I'm looking forward to working with all of you, and my gratitude to you, Judge, for doing this virtually. I really have appreciated that, and it is unprecedented. I don't know of any judge that has done it like this, but I congratulate you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you for addressing the group. So let's go back to the oath. Long oath, many words. Some of you probably were glazed over. So we're going to hit some highlights real quick to help you better understand the job that you're doing. Okay. Now, for those of you who were paying attention, there was a word in the oath that I will bet you have never heard in a professional setting. I'm going to ask if anyone heard what the word was. What word did you hear in that oath that you do not hear as a professional grown-up? Anyone have an idea? All right, I'll tell you. The word was secret. I just gave you an oath as a judge, and I made you say that you'll keep secrets. Now, that is an unusual word in the law because we like to use big words like confidential or proprietary. Lawyers get paid by the syllable, and that's a big one. But the legislature chose to use the word secret. And I believe that's because it is a word that every single one of us who went to elementary school understands. We have all dealt with keeping secrets. And so I'm going to give you my definition of the word secret as it applies to the oath. Here is my definition. A secret is something that I know that you don't know, but wish you knew. Something I know that you don't know, but wish you knew. That's secret. What do you think? Nods, shakes? Does that sound all right? All right, so let's test this theory. Raise your hand if you know what I had for lunch today. Search in the room. No hands. All right, well, I know what I had for lunch, and you don't. Is that a secret? Nods or shakes? The answer, correct, Mr. Morrissey. The answer is no, because none of you cares what I had for lunch. Spoiler alert, I ate a bag of Funyuns because I worked through lunch. But nonetheless, it's not a secret because you don't care. Well, let me tell you this. Everything that you see, hear, say, or do in the grand jury process, someone desperately wants to know. Everything. Let's start easy. Do you think the people who are being presented to the grand jury for felony charges might want to know that they may be arrested at the end of the day? Would you want to know? I'd want to know. You've heard from some of the lawyers. Do you think the lawyers want to know what you think about their case? Maybe how close the vote was. Was it 9? Was it 12-0? I can speak for the lawyers. Yes, they definitely want to know what your thoughts were about their case. You think the defendants want to know who's working against them, who's squealing on them? The answer is yes. Everyone wants to know everything. And that's one of the problems with living in the social media era that we are in, is people seem to share everything about their life, no matter how personal it is. It's out there for the world to see, and it becomes an expectation. Now, in this process, you will hear all kinds of nasty stuff about your friends and neighbors. I mean, you're going to hear juicy stuff. That's kind of the way it works. Now, unless your town is the one town in Texas that has no gossip, I know better, then everyone wants to know. And the truth is, if it weren't that way, Facebook wouldn't exist. And I hear that Facebook now has reached all 5 of our counties. But you're sworn to secrecy, and you're not allowed to tell anything that happens. And I'm going to give you some examples so you understand why it's so important, that it's not just another one of those throwaway things that we tell you. Let's say that Mr. Gabaldon comes to you and presents a case of family violence, aggravated assault family violence. And he comes in and says that Mrs. Smith was injured. We believe it was by her husband, Mr. Smith. And here's what he did. He took a baseball bat to her and he knocked her unconscious, and then he threw her through a 3rd-story plate glass window onto the concrete below. She went in the hospital for 2 weeks, right? And he starts laying out pictures. And you look at these pictures and your stomach's just turning like this. And you, yeesh. And after 2 minutes, the presiding grand juror says, Mr. Gabaldon, we've heard enough. Everybody else out. And you throw them out, and the 12 of you are alone, and you close the door and you just vote. And that vote is 12-0, ag assault, deadly weapon, family violence. He's going to go to prison if you have anything to say about it, right? And you're just feeling good that you've taken care of Mrs. Smith. There's a problem, though. And that is that one of the jurors knows Mrs. Smith and works with her at the bank. And she remembers that when Mrs. Smith was out for 2 weeks, the boss was overheard talking to the other boss. And she said, I don't believe the story that Mrs. Smith tells about just having a car wreck. I saw how beat up she was. I think it was a DWI accident. I think she's a drunk. And at noon, the day she comes back to work, I am firing her. Right now, you know what actually happened. And so you're sitting there. Oh my gosh, this is just going to make it worse for Mrs. Smith. So you go into your boss's office and you close the door and you lower your voice and you say, look, I'm not supposed to tell anyone this. So I want you to promise me you're not going to repeat this to anyone. Now, what does anyone say if you preface something with that, I mean, they're thinking, oh boy, this is going to be good. I cross my heart and hope today I won't tell a soul. And you say, look, she didn't have a drunk driving record. Her husband almost beat her to death and threw her off a building. Please don't fire her. He's going to be arrested. We just indicted him. Just keep it to yourself and don't do anything. And the boss is very magnanimous. And she says, don't worry. You've done the right thing. I won't fire her. Thank you for telling me. I'll keep it a secret. And you walk out and you're feeling great about yourself. First you indict the guy and now you've protected her job, and that's great. And as soon as that door swings closed, the boss is holding one of these. And those thumbs are rattling on that thing, and they're sending a message to someone that says, I'm not supposed to tell you this, so you have to promise me you're not going to tell anybody. Does that sound familiar? Because they have someone they trust just as much as you trusted them. But so does that person, and the next and the next. Now, how long is it going to be, knowing your towns as you do, before every person in your town knows that Mr. Smith is going to jail and charged with aggravated assault of Mrs. Smith? Maybe an hour before it's whooshed through our little towns? How long before it's on Facebook? My Facebook people here. Most people say 10 minutes before someone wants to be the bearer of bad news because it gets them a lot of likes and comments and new subscribers. And so the next question is, how long before Mr. Smith finds out? And the answer is before the end of the day. And so Mr. Smith's going to go home at the end of the day and walk in, and there's Mrs. Smith. And now what happens is that maybe Mr. Smith beats her to death. All because you were trying to protect her by violating your oath. Because bad things happen when you break secrecy. And we can turn it around real easy. Let's say that Mr. White presents a case there in Jeff Davis County for inappropriate relationship between a teacher and a student. And he walks in and he starts presenting the case, and all 12 of you just say, oh my gosh, you've heard about this already. And none of you believes it. And so you tell him, Mr. White, you're going to have to give us everything you got. I want every witness, every statement, every video, everything. And so Mr. White, he's game, and he gives you a 8-hour presentation on this case. And when he's done and you vote, it is 11-1, and you just, it's not that the 11 think there's no probable cause. You're convinced it didn't happen. You think it's a lie, period. And you vote no, and the presiding grand juror signs a no bill, and you go home. And everybody's happy, except that one. And that one person always hated that teacher. He gave her a D. She hated his guts all these years. And she just knows that it has to be true, even though there was not any evidence of it. But this juror's smarter than the one in my last story. And so she says, well, I'm not allowed to tell him what I know. So I've got to, I have an idea. And so she calls a parent of another student in that same kid's class and says, now look, the judge made me promise not to tell you what I know. I'm not going to risk getting in trouble. All I'm saying is I wouldn't let my kid be in a science class with a child molester. Just saying. All right. Does that break the oath? Yes, of course it does. So how long before every parent of every student in those that teacher's classes has been told he's a child molester? I think it's end of the day. End of the day. Before then. How long before that person is being suspended for an investigation? Pretty quick, you think? That's our kids we're talking about, right? We can't risk that. So at the end of the year, when they renew contracts, is that teacher getting renewed? Probably not. Almost surely not. Do you think that person ever teaches again? Honestly? Or do you think this follows them forever? Because every time they apply for a job, someone picks up the phone or sends an email. So basically what we're talking about there is that because one person violated the oath, someone that 11 of you said didn't even merit further prosecution has had their life ruined. They've lost their career, maybe a divorce. They'll probably have to leave town because we know our towns. If everyone in town thinks you're a child molester, you're probably going to have to leave, right? You're gone. So you destroy someone's life by violating the oath when 11 of you had said it doesn't even merit further discussion. Don't violate the oath, folks. Defendants vanish when they find out they've been charged. And by the way, that's happened here before. We had someone go to the press after a grand jury meeting where they indicted this giant drug ring. And the press listed off the name of every person and what their charge was. And we still haven't found some of them. They were just poof, like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Mexico, guys, is right there. Some of you are 5 minutes from Mexico. It is not hard to get across the border if you find out you're facing life in prison. Witnesses can get intimidated. That has also happened. Defendant finds out what's going on, gives a call to the witness and says, you either rescind that statement or I'm going to do the following things to you and your family. And witnesses, they recant or they just don't show up for grand jury. So I've driven the point home enough. Nothing good ever comes from violating the oath, no matter how good your intentions may be. Something bad always happens. And the worst thing that can happen may be the fact that you can go to jail for doing it. If we find out that you violated your oath and something like that has happened, there's a real good chance that the next grand jury is going to have your name presented. So don't do that. All right. We are going to move on to the next little topic. Okay, here we go. It's time for a little participation. I want everyone to close their eyes for a minute. Don't fall asleep. Just close your eyes. Okay. I want you to now picture the one person in your youth that made your life a living hell. It could be a bully. It could be an ex. It could be someone that broke your heart, a teacher that failed you, anything like that. All right, now open your eyes. Everybody's got that person in their mind? Okay. I want you to imagine that tomorrow you're called together with the grand jury for the first time. And our prosecutors walk in and say, all right, for the first case I'm going to present, I am presenting Mr. Your Bully. And you pop those eyes wide and you're thinking, surely this isn't the moment that I've been praying for all of my life. And it is. It is that guy. It is that girl. And you've waited your whole life to hear that they got their comeuppance. And now it's even better than that. It's in your hands. And you're thinking, lay it on me, Mr. Gabaldon. Come on, Mr. White, hit me with the juicy stuff. And they lay it all out and you're just deflated. It is nothing. And you know in your heart there is no probable cause. And now you're torn. Are you going to let them walk? Or are you going to punish them for what they put you through all those years ago? And the oath speaks to that. The oath says, present no person from envy, hatred, or malice. So what that means is, when you walk in there and close that door, you leave your personal feelings and experiences with these people behind, right? Now, I have put many, many people in jail. I have put some people in prison for life in my 8 years on this job. And I've known most of them because it's a small town. Everybody knows everybody. You put those feelings aside and you do the right thing with the power that we have entrusted to you. And then there's the flip side. Neither shall you leave any person unpresented from love, fear, favor, affection, or hope of reward. Your boss is being presented. And you just know that if you vote no, and then he finds out, you'll get a raise. Or that person you've always wanted a date with, she's getting presented. And you just know if you vote no, and she finds out, maybe this time she'll go ahead and go out with you. Okay. No, you put those feelings aside. You don't not present someone when there is probable cause, and you know it, just because you have a relationship with them. That would be the wrong thing to do. So what do you do if you have a relationship and you can't put it aside? Raise your hand if you are married. Hold them up. Okay, keep them up. Now, I want you to keep your hand up if you would be willing to indict your spouse if they were presented to you as a grand juror. I'm putting my hand down. There's usually one or two that keep their hands up. I'm looking. They're probably watching us on YouTube going, I just know he's got his hand up somewhere. No. All right. Ah, there's one right there, number 173. I see you down there. All right. Most people can't do that. Okay. Most people can't indict their spouse. And so what do you do if a case is presented and you have some involvement with it? You may be law enforcement or work in a jail, and someone may be presented that you have inside knowledge about. Maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your child or your boss. It's not just someone you know. Okay, we all know everybody. It has to be someone that you are compromised. Either you know something about the case that you have experienced, has to be about the case, or you have an emotional connection with them that you cannot put aside. You hate their guts. You're in love with them. When that happens, there's an easy solution. As soon as you realize that that's the person or the issue that you know something about, you just raise your hand and say, hey guys, I got to leave. I can't be a part of this one, right? You're a jailer and you have witnessed this person confessing to someone saying, oh, I'm actually pretending to be crazy. I'm really saying I'm doing it so that they'll give me an insanity defense. Well, if you're presented with that case, do you have some inside information about that person that might reflect on whether you think they were actually culpable? Yes, you do. You got to leave. Okay. But you got to be honest with yourself about it. You don't get to leave just because it's distasteful. You don't get to leave just because you know the person, they're your neighbor. They're on the school board with you. They're a member of your bridge club. That's not going to do it. We need our communities to regulate themselves. And in our little towns, in the town of Marathon, Valentine, if everyone who knew everybody stepped out, then we would not be able to decide for our own communities what's right and what's wrong. So you got to put those feelings aside when you can. But if you can't, be honest with yourself, get up and walk out. I will speak for the prosecutors and tell you this. They will never ask you why you're leaving. It's none of their business. Because when you do that, it's proof that you are following the oath, right? So they're not going to ask you, why are you following your oath and doing the right thing? They're going to let you go. So I don't want you to worry about what people are going to think. I just want you to get up, step out of the room and say, hey guys, when you're done voting, let me know. I'll come back in for the next case. That's how you do it. Now, what's next? Two things. We're almost done. We're almost finished. So sigh of relief for everyone. Two more things. I told you earlier that the presiding grand juror has those three jobs, the paperwork, etc. But the other job is they are the ones who get to communicate with me. Now, let me tell you how that works. When I close this room, I am through being a part of your process. I will not be the one providing legal answers. I won't be talking to you about evidence. You can't bounce your thoughts off of me. Ask me if you did the right thing. I'm out. Okay. All of that information comes from the prosecutor. They will answer your legal questions. They will talk to you about the evidence. That's who you talk to, not me. You can't come to me with questions. But what if the problem you have is with the DA? What if the DA is the problem? You don't have to go to the DA to complain about the DA, right? You've got to go over their head, and that's when you can come to me. So let's talk about what that means. Let me see if I can come up with a good example. Okay, I got two. I told you earlier that you can't deliberate and vote until you're alone in the room, right? Everybody remembers that. Got to be alone, 12, door closed. All right. Well, what if, let's say Mr. Gabaldon is presenting a case to you and he says, all right, folks, that's everything. Time to deliberate. And he sits down. And my presiding grand juror says, I think the judge said you have to leave before we can talk. And he says, oh, don't worry about that guy. He's always extra careful. I won't say a word. Just pretend I'm not here. I just want to hear what you have to say. All right. He won't leave the room. Can you complain to him about him not leaving the room? No. Time to come to me. Okay. The way that you come to me is very precise. If you don't do it this way, you will not hear back. It is this. It must be in writing, although an email is okay. It must come from the presiding grand juror or the alternate if there is the presiding wasn't there that day. And it must simply say, the grand jury of Presidio County wants to meet with the judge. Signed, presiding juror. That's it. Comes to my office. Do not call. Do not try to catch me at the post office and say, quick question, because I'm going to turn and run. Not allowed to talk to you. If you do that, I will summon you together. All 12 of you will come, no matter who was there that day. Everyone has to be there. And I will get alone with the 12 of you and I will say, what's up? Tell me what's going on. If I can answer your question, I will answer your question. If I can solve your problem, I'll solve your problem. If I can't, I'll tell you why I can't. That's it. That's how it works. Now, I have only been called in twice by grand juries. One of those times, as an example, would be, let's say that the prosecutor presented a case to you and you said, okay, time for you to leave so we can deliberate. And as the door is closing, the prosecutor sticks their face in the door and says, by the way, no bill this person. I don't really want this person to be indicted. I'm only doing it because the sheriff wants me to, and I don't want him to be mad. So just go ahead and no bill. Thanks. Bye. And closes the door. And the grand jury's going, what the hell was that? It's our job. It's not your job to tell us what to do. Your job is to present the evidence and let us decide. And they have no idea what happens now. And so in that instance, they reach out to me. They send me an email. The grand jury of this county wants to meet with the judge. I went over there and we had a meeting and I addressed it and I solved the problem. So please don't try to go around the presiding grand juror because Ms. Olguin knows who those 5 people are. And if it's anyone else trying to get to me, it's not going to happen, right? Don't call, don't ask questions. Just tell me you want to meet with me and I will come meet with you. It's happened twice out of how many grand juries? 80 grand juries I've had. So it's not likely, but if it happens, follow that process. All right, almost done. You're thinking, what more could he possibly have to say after however long it's been? All right. And this part's really important. So everybody focus back in just for a minute. The grand juries are hand chosen by me. And the reason the legislature has us do that is because we want to make sure that every segment of the community is represented. Okay. That's everyone from, the high school dropout up to the rocket scientist, all genders, all nationalities. Every segment of our community deserves to have a say in what happens in their county. Now, if it wasn't that way, I would do it, right? I'm the expert. I wear the robe. Y'all elected me. Why don't I do all this stuff? Because we want our towns to decide for themselves what's okay. Do you believe what's okay in Terlingua is exactly what's okay in Del City? I hope you're all saying no. Because every community, all 13 communities of our district are different. And we have different feelings about things. Now, I'll prove it to you. I'll prove to you how important it is. Raise a hand for a second if you have brothers or sisters. Any sibling at all. All right, put them down. Grow up in the same house, maybe the same parents, go to the same school. Who knows? It could be really close. You could even be twins, right? Do you think the same way about everything as your sibling? Nods or shakes? No, almost everyone shakes their head at that. Okay, I have a sibling. We do not feel the same about very much, but I'll give you a better example. I have 3 children. I have twins and I have another daughter. They're all within 3 years of each other. And as they were growing up, every Friday night, we had pizza night. Everybody loves pizza. Pizza night. There was only one rule. The rule was you had to agree on the toppings. That's it. The three kids grew up in the same house with the same parents. Two of them shared a womb together. They have been together every minute of their lives. All you got to do is agree on the toppings, and we have pizza night. And they loved pizza. How often do you think we had leftovers instead of pizza on Friday night? You parents know what's coming. Half or more. Because three kids couldn't decide on pepperoni, hamburger, olives, or mushrooms. And it was just, it was hilarious, right? From my perspective, but flabbergasting. I mean, I wanted pizza, but you can't get it because the three kids won't agree. I mean, okay, that's three. Okay. 9 of you have to agree before someone gets charged. 9. From different backgrounds, different genders, different races, different ages, different education, everything, different politics. And you're going to sit there together, and 9 of you are going to have to agree, 9 or more. That's how I know whatever you decide is right. Because it's so hard to do. It's hard to get 9 people to agree on anything. Gosh, go on Facebook. Post "I love puppies" on Facebook. And within 5 comments, someone's going to call you a name. That's how hard it is to agree on anything. Okay? So when the 9 of you agree, that's the right answer. But the only reason it's right for the county is because all of you were there. Because there is some segment of every population that thinks like you. Now, you may not even know who they are, but they're there. And they are represented by you in this group. And if you don't go, or worse, if you go and don't vote your heart, you have removed from self-governance everyone who thinks like you on that issue. Okay? It's that important. I don't care if the person sitting next to you is actually a Culberson County rocket scientist. Your opinion about whether that guy should face charges is just as important and valuable as the rocket scientist. Don't ever think to yourself, well, she knows better, so I'm just going to say whatever she says is fine. That ain't this, okay? So I'm going to ask you for one more promise. You've taken an oath, but I'm going to ask you for a promise. And that promise is that when you're in that room, you will apply your feelings and your belief and your opinion to the law and the facts as it's given to you. And when you decide what your vote is, that's how you'll vote. Will you promise me that? I'd like to see nods. That's why this system is so great. That's why we trust it so much, because there is no exception to this in Texas. If you say no, that's it. And it works because all of you together represent your county perfectly. So I've got your promise. I'm going to hang on to it. I know that you'll do it. So my last word of encouragement is this. Every grand juror I have ever met with after grand jury has told me when their service was over, you were right. I really enjoyed it. Can I do it again? And every time I do this in person, someone stands up and walks up and they're disqualified for a year after you serve. You're disqualified for a year. They always come up every time and say, please, can I do it again? We only had 3 days of cases presented. And I really wanted to do more. I tell them I'm sorry. That will be the same with you. And the reason it's fun and the reason you'll want to do it again is because you'll take it seriously. And you'll come out of it knowing that you were the gatekeeper of liberty for everyone in your town and your county. It's a special feeling. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I am going to send an email with all of your email addresses for each county to the prosecutors for your county. And they will reach out to you and they will set up a time to get together and they'll be able to answer all your questions. I'm sure with 80 people in this room, there's probably 79 with questions. But the DAs are going to answer those questions for you. I have told you what you need to know. I want to give you one more warning that just came to mind. I don't think it's going to happen again, but last year, because of the pandemic, the Supreme Court authorized us to extend that grand jury 6 more months. So last year's January grand jury was supposed to end in July, and we held them forward until now because we didn't know how to get together and pick another grand jury without being in person, and I wasn't willing to do that. So I've come up with this instead. I don't know what's going to happen in July. I'm hoping that with the vaccine going around the way it is, we will all be over this by July. But there's always a chance I may have to extend. So if that happens, I'll let you know. I'll tell you that every single grand juror that I asked said, yes, please. When I asked them to extend, not one person said they'd rather not last year. So I'm not worried, but I just wanted to let you know it's possible that will happen. We've also had one year when a grand jury was never called. My Fort Davis grand jury was put together. They were very excited. They were very eager, and not one time were they summoned together. And then we had a grand jury in Presidio County that could not get 9 one time. For 6 months, 0 indictments. Murderers, child molesters, all of them walking the streets because they could never get more than 8 people to show up at a time. If you do that, the justice system grinds to a halt. And the bad guys are all out there. So don't do that. Come together, communicate well, participate in the process. I know you're going to do great. So at this time, with my thanks and that of Lori and of the prosecutors that you've met here today, I am going to excuse you all. Oh, you're right. That's right. Alternates. Thank you so much for that pop-up message. Real quick, to my alternates in the room. This may be the last you hear from anyone, because the way an alternate works is not like a football game where if somebody is unavailable, you go running out. The alternates only step in if someone becomes disqualified to serve, moves out of town, dies, gets a felony charge. Then I take the first alternate, I email them, they step up and they move in, and I swear them in with that big oath, and off you go. So there's a real good chance that the fourth alternate is done for the 6 months right now. The third alternate maybe also. Maybe 20% of the time the first alternate gets called up, maybe 10% of the time the second. So alternates, my guess is for most of you, this is where it ends, and you'll have done your service. But if you get the call from me, I'm going to get you in a Zoom. I'm going to raise that right hand of yours and swear you in, and off you go. So we'll let you know who the alternates are when we send the email around. We'll let you know. But in the meantime, this time I really mean it. That was the last thing. So it was great to see everybody. Thank you for giving me your time. How long have I had you? I'm just curious. 1 hour on the nose, to the minute. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. You are free to go, and we are off the record.